example over VC where I've actually said gibberish?
What example do you want me to give you? Look at any of our past debates.
An example of where you think I was actually gibbering. So give me that example right now.
What do you think happened in our debate where we talked about moral realism? I asked you 4 times to simplify your argument because I had no idea what you were talking about. Because I had no idea what you were talking about. I had to ask you if you could rephrase it. I had to ask you to use simpler terms. I had to ask you to reformulate it a few times. The issue is when you use your high-level vocab and you just switch the words around for another high-level vocab.
You said nobody understood what I said, but Vibes, D1, Gios, Ariana,
D1. You're telling me D1 understood what you were talking about, but I didn't. Do you believe that?
Explain why I said he explained why. Yeah.
Really? D1 knew what you were talking about, but I didn't. Do you actually believe that?
Yeah. What's the problem?
If you believe that, I mean, I won't get into that. Okay, we'll leave that for another time. I love James. James is my best friend. Okay, but I won't get into that. Like, no offense to Vibe. I love Vibes. Vibes is a good person. We're friends. Do you think he knew what you were talking about and I didn't?
Perhaps, yeah.
Okay.
You're trolling.
Also, it doesn't even have to be that you didn't understand what I'm saying. You could understand what I'm saying, right? But you just don't have a good refutation to what I was saying, correct?
No. Not that. Okay. But I'm talking about they don't know what you're talking about. I'm saying when you use high-level vocab that I don't even understand and you phrase it in a way that I have no idea what you're talking about and that you look at people...
Which vocab did I use that you didn't understand?
I mean, I can go back to the debate, but I'm not going to sit here and scroll through 2 hours of recording.
No. You don't need to go back to the debate.
Just 4 times to reiterate what you were talking about. What?
Just give me something off the top of your head, which you did not understand that I used.
Yeah, when I asked you 4 times what it meant for instrumental concepts to have a foundation in the mind.
I never said that. I never said on the recording.
Okay, then why the fuck would you ask me for an example if you're just going to deny it?
I never said instrumental concepts.
Because then we have to go back to the recording anyway. So it's the most useless question ever. Just don't ask me next time, okay?
Useless question? No, the question is useful. It's just that your response was useless, retard.
But if I had a right response, you were just going to deny it anyway, so I'd have to go back to the recording in the first place.
No, I'm not going to just deny it anyway unless your response is false. Your response was just false.
Could you talk about something like environmental factors to moral evolution?
I never said moral evolution. I said environmental factors, which acts as some basis for moral anti-realism. There's nothing complex about that. It's called evolutionary meta-ethics.
What environmental factor is what I was wondering. What does that mean?
I've already talked to you about this. Genetics, personality, etc. What are you talking about?
Genetics. That's your environmental factor. Genetics.
Genetics is something which
you use words and then you replace them with things that are not the word. Like genetics and environment are completely separate, right? When we ask how is personality determined, we literally use half genetics, half environment, right? These are terms we don't often associate with one another.
No, that's false.
So when you use these words and you use it in a way that's completely different from how we usually use it, you're just not convincing anybody. Because then the question is, what the fuck were you talking about in the first place?
Evolutionary meta-ethics, they talk about this. This is not something which is weird or complex or random. This is something which everyone talks about. This is normal stuff. Entry page. Evolutionary meta-ethics, they talk about this. Darwinian evolution affects genetic conditions. Pretty simple. This is not something which is complex. This is something which is known. Even T-Jump uses the same exact arguments. What are you talking about? Or similar argument, not regarding morality, but he's aware of the arguments.
When I use words like environmental, the first thing that comes to my head is external of the self, external of the body. I'm thinking
the external
of the
things affect certain things within the body of the mind. Retarded.
But then you talk about morals, right? And so when you tell me you have something like genes, my question is, why the fuck didn't you just say our genetic code? So when you say environmental, I'm thinking something totally different.
The only thing which composes environmental conditions in this context.
Fine, but when you use words so broadly, such that you no longer know what they mean, you're not convincing anybody. Because then we have to go back and be like, okay,
why
what do you mean by
repeating your claim, which is in question? I don't see how that's convincing or substantive. But anyways,
well, don't worry. It's just what I have to do. Okay.
My point here is this, right? If you understand that environmental factors tweaks and affects one's genetic coding, then how are you going to say that they're completely extraneous to each other? That doesn't make any sense to me.
No, I'm not saying they're completely extraneous. I'm saying when I think of the word environmental, and then you use it in a way that's probably completely separate from the way that most people are thinking about it, because usually we have genetics and environment
different ways. So
exactly, that's the issue. The issue is when you come up with a word, and then you change the meaning to fit an argument, but you never tell us what that meaning is, and then we have to figure it out ourselves. So we're not convincing anybody, because then we have to question what the fuck else was he meaning when he said this word earlier, because now your entire argument is what the fuck
you asking me what I mean doesn't mean that you didn't understand. You could just be trying to confirm your understanding of what I was saying, which is different.
And then when I'm wrong, it means I didn't understand anything in the first place, did it? Because I had no idea what you were talking about when you used the word environmental.
You said that environmental
when you use certain words,
external factors, correct?
External to the body, yeah.
Yes, and I explained to you that these external factors under evolutionary theories acts as you could say an impact towards certain things that are intrinsic to us, like genetics and so on. Desires and so on are influenced by environmental conditions. Therefore, in the context that I was talking about, they're definitely relevant to each other. So I don't even know what you're talking about.
I'm not arguing against your argument, right? You can have your argument, whatever. I'm saying is when you use certain words and then you use them in a way that's not at all relevant to the argument, and then we have to go down and be like, okay, what does this actually mean? And then you tell me, well, this is what it means. I'm like, okay, then I got everything else wrong because I have no idea what you're talking about earlier. You're not persuading me or the audience why the argument is proper, right?
So
right, so that's what I'm saying. Like, the rhetoric isn't there.
Seconds ago, how it was relevant. Did I not just explain it to you? Like, are you stupid? I just explained to you the relevance, and then you go back to, it's just not relevant.
It can be relevant. It's cool. Manner. It can be relevant, but that's not what I'm talking about.
Dumbass.
Paul, I'm not talking about whether it's relevant or not. What I'm saying is when you use a word.
Then why did you mention relevancy a couple seconds ago? What are you talking about? You just mentioned relevancy.
Oh my God.
What are you even saying?
When you use a word like environment, which is most often not associated with genetics in the internal person, and then you tell me what you were actually talking about was the word environment that had to do with the internal body. I'm like, okay, now my entire framework of what your argument was changes, right? So it's hard to persuade me that your argument is correct or anyone in the audience when we constantly
listen,
what the hell you're talking about during the middle of the argument.
I don't care about persuading low-level retards, right? The point here is you said that it's most often not used in these contexts. I asked you for the demonstration for that claim.
You want me to demonstrate that when we talk about like the word environment, we don't often refer to like the internal body? Seriously?
No, that's not what I said. Nice drama.
What do you want me to say?
I needed to demonstrate that. Environmental conditions are not mentioned pertaining to the influence of genetic conditions in coding.
That's not the argument. The argument isn't that they're not.
That is my argument. So if you're not even making that argument,
is that the most often use of the word, the most common use of the word environment in this context doesn't have to do with genetics. It's like the complete opposite, right? So when you use words that we don't understand in this context, and we have to flip around our understanding every 5 minutes of what the hell you're saying, you're not persuading us. You're confusing us. And so we're no longer like,
dumb. You know what's dumb?
Argument is actually really smart, and he's actually influencing. It's like, what the fuck did Apollo just say? Now I have to open up fucking a dictionary and Stanford Encyclopedia to understand the basis of your argument. So I'm not persuaded. Would you allow me to explain
why that's a bad argument?
Yeah, go for it.
Sure. So generally speaking, when we use the word punching, right, we're talking about physical interaction. However, there can be persons who say, I punched the hell out of you, like in a figurative manner. That doesn't mean that what you're saying is unintelligible or is not understandable. It is still understandable based on context clues, regardless of the fact that generally speaking, when you use the word punching or other terms, we're referring to, like, for example, totally different cases. Same thing with like son, for example. People in the debate community call each other son. They don't literally mean they're like biologically related to them from a father-son perspective. Regardless of the fact that generally speaking, people use son in a biological context, that doesn't mean that what they're saying is unintelligible or is just gibberish. There's something called context clues, and the fact that we can use these context clues to derive relevancy of certain ideas.
But no one does.
What this was just garbage. Totally.
That's the issue.
Next argument again.
One
that was
just use the words you're using and interpret them properly, which is why everyone is asking questions, because we have no idea what the hell you're talking about. If you could do that, then fine.
You're the only person who asked me a question regarding this. What are you talking about?
Because I was the one who was debating you. When people debate you, do they not ask you questions all the time about what the words you're using are?
Were you the only person who listened to my arguments?
No, okay, look up at the poll, right?
So
when we asked what is causal power, 9 people said no, Apollo.
So that means
people just don't understand what these words are. And then you use them over and over in meanings that we don't seem to understand because we're changing the meanings then. And the argument just no longer persuades us.
You keep on saying we, and when I ask for the we in question, you say I. And I just explained to you that you weren't the only person who was listening to my arguments, and the other persons who were in fact listening to my arguments had no issue with how I comprehended or how I communicated my ideas. So
Vibes in D1, right? Vibes in D1 are the people that you're basing on? Vibes in D1, right?
Uh-huh.
Okay, they're intellectuals then, man. I don't know. I can't do it then because you're not persuading anybody when you use these giant words.
I don't think it's a matter of intellectuals. I just think you're trying to guess at the situation to put forth.
I think everybody knows what I'm talking about. I think everyone says the same thing.
It's not working.
Even if people think you win debates, that's fine. But you're not convincing anybody that your arguments are good, nor are they correct.
Yeah, again, I've already contradicted on several occasions. You said I was not convincing anyone my argument is good. Yes, so I've just appealed to persons who thought I beat you both argumentatively and rhetorically, like Darth Arianis.
Yes, when you appeal to D1 and when you appeal to Vibes, you really show me that you have good rhetoric. And then when you appeal to
what about Arianis?
who studies philosophy for a living.
Why are you nitpicking persons who are potentially incompetent?
I already went over Arianis. When we talk about Arianis,
for the sake of, like,
I told you this. Generally speaking, philosophers who are in the debating community don't look at how good they convince the audience. only look at it as how coherent is this argument given what I understand about philosophy. And when that person is like, okay, well, your argument was probably better from a philosophical basis, that's not telling anybody how you convince them. It has nothing to do with rhetoric. All it has to do with what is the coherent basis of the argument. Yes, you're right. Philobabble nerds understand your argument.
You Absolutely. Just said nobody understands my argument. Then you can see that they're
You think when I said nobody understands my
argument?
You think the word nobody means nobody in the entire universe? Seriously? Philobabble nerds get what you're saying. You aren't looking at Philobabble nerds. I went over this in the earlier part, right? Nothing changed. Philobabble nerds are not people we look at to gauge rhetoric because they're smart people, but that's what they are. They're smart. They go off of the arguments. They don't go off of persuasion because they don't understand what it means to be persuaded of an argument. They only know what it means for an argument to be valid, right? So we don't use that kind of criterion.
Okay, so I mean, I've already just contradicted your point, and you're trying to basically just appeal to the philosophy community. You've not even demonstrated that nobody from this community has failed to understand my arguments. And plus, when you say like we don't understand the arguments, you just re-appeal to yourself, which isn't a substantive demonstration.
I don't know what you want me to do.
I mean, we can end this right now. It's pretty obvious you have no arguments. You're just like a trash debater with no actual good argumentation, and you have like mediocre rhetoric. So I find it very ironic.
I don't know what you want me to do.
My rhetorical skill.
Like, I don't know what you want me to do to prove it to you. Like, I could show you, like, look at Jack.
I don't know what you want me to do. I don't know. Prove it to me.
I don't know what to tell you. How? How can you be proven to? Tell me. What threshold of evidence are you looking for? It was a question. What threshold of evidence are you looking for? Because you're not convincing anybody. You think that's good enough
evidence? Evidence which is probability raising, something which shows me why this is correct. It's pretty simple.
Do you understand that you're just babbling? What does that mean? Evidence that is probability raising. How can I possibly gauge that?
Raises the probability of some idea. Pretty simple. Bubba's understood that. Bubba's is not a philosophy debater. How can I possibly
be like, I have two claims here, two pieces of evidence. Let me see which one gauges the probability of the claim. How do you understand that word to me? Because I don't know what you mean. How do you understand it to ask Bubba's? He understood it perfectly, and he does it with debate philosophy. You do. What are you talking? No, when you tell me I want evidence that is probability raising, and I'm like, what the fuck? I have two pieces of evidence here. How do I determine which one is probability raising? How do you even want me to do that? How do you want me to figure that out? By showing good evidence. That's your burden, not mine. Why do I have to teach how to good evidence is probability raising? I can't just show good evidence, right? What does it mean to be probability raising? Of course you can. It's possible. No, I have to show evidence that raises the probability. How do I do that? How do I determine that? How do you do that? Why is that my burden to explain? I'm not your teacher. Exactly. Because you have no idea what you're looking for in terms of evidence. You like, okay, show me evidence that makes the claim better. That's what I'm saying. How do you do philosophy but don't know what something? You have no idea what it means for the evidence to actually be convincing. You have no threshold for good evidence according to you. Because any evidence that you take, you're just going to be like, okay, this didn't raise the probability. I don't have bars for good evidence. Apollo, I asked you, how can I convince you right now? You said, give me an evidence that is probability raising. I said, what does that mean? You said, why do I have to tell you? So how can I possibly convince you when you have no idea what it means for you to be convinced? I already explained to you what it means. You said it was probability raising, right? Yeah, and you asked me for the explanation, and I said to you something which raises the probability of an idea. And you just redoing the word. That's the same thing over and over again. That's not my responsibility. You just told me what is probability raising. It raises probability. You don't understand the issue with that? You're not explaining anything. So I'll ask you again, what evidence is considered probability raising? You just said the same thing twice. No, I didn't. What is probability raising? It's raising the probability. I figured that out. Thank you. An idea, yes, that's a clarification. What's the problem there? It's the same thing you just said over and again. It's the same words. It's going to be the same. Obviously, it's going to be the same thing conceptually. So I'm going to ask again, Apollo. What does it mean for something to be probability raising without repeating yourself? Go ahead. I'm meaning the same thing conceptually doesn't mean I wasn't just repeating myself, right? I'm just still giving a clarification on the same concept with different words and usage. You said the same words twice. So I'll ask again. What does it mean to be probability raising? What evidence would you like to be presented? I'll ask again, what evidence would you like to be presented? What does it mean to be probability raising? How can I figure that out? What evidence is probability raising? I don't need to teach. I'm not your debate teacher. What the fuck? Okay. Because you have no idea what evidence you're looking for. Because you could be like, why do you think me not being willing to go down this path of teaching no matter evidence I give you, the reason you know that you can't set a threshold is because once I reach that threshold, you're fucked. Real quick? Why do you think I don't know what evidence you are unwilling? Wait, listen to me, Moose, listen. Mm-hmm. Why do you think that me being unwilling to go down this irrelevant rabbit hole of teaching you how to raise the probability for claims mean that I don't have any means of doing such? It could just mean I'm just not willing to go down the irrelevant rabbit hole because I think you're irrelevant for the major topic. Prove that claim to me, prove the entailment. Because when I ask you, what evidence could I give you that could show you, that could make you understand that I'm right, and you're telling me nothing, I have no idea is your answer. Then what were you looking for to begin with? That was not my response. I didn't say I never had an answer, Apollo. I could have presented to you 7 quadrillion bazillion pieces of evidence, And you never would have said yes. That convinced me.
I have no idea.
Because you never set a threshold for what it meant to be convinced.
That's a straw man fallacy.
No, you're finally understanding. You're finally understanding that you don't set thresholds because you know that they can be met, and you know that once they're met, you're fucked.
Wait, could you prove
which is why
that?
you don't set them in general.
Could you prove that?
Yes, because the second you accept, the second that you say this is what would convince me, and someone presents that, you're fucked. You lose because you've agreed that that would convince you, and yet it's been presented. So when you don't set a threshold and you say, okay, I have nothing, no boundary for what you could present that would convince me, then people can't convince you because you have not given us any leeway to present you evidence.
I have no boundary. I never said I have no bars.
What does it mean to be probability raising? How can I do that? Okay. If you don't explain it, then how can I convince you? Do you understand that? When you don't give me what you want to receive, I can't help you. Because no matter what evidence I give, I have no idea whether you're going to accept it or not. So why am I wasting my time? If you can tell me what you're looking for, I'm happy to give it.
I'm pretty sure we're both aware of the normal evidence which raises claims to be true or gives claims truth status.
It's different for every person, so I'm not playing a guessing game, figuring out what convinces you. If you could tell me, I can provide it for you. I'd be happy to. So what would convince you?
What would convince me? I've already told you.
I'd like something other than probability raising, where probability raising means raises the probability, because that doesn't explain anything. Can I have an example of a piece of evidence that would convince you of something?
Every evidential virtues which are generally used in inductive or abductive reasoning.
Say that again?
Every evidential virtues that are generally used in inductive or abductive reasoning.
Evidential virtues used in inductive reasoning.
Inductive or abductive reasoning.
So you understand what I was talking about earlier, like you just throw a bunch of big words in a sentence, and it doesn't mean it's incoherent, because I understand what you're saying.
What are you talking about?
You understand when you use words like that are layman, people are like, what the fuck is he talking about? You understand that, right?
What is he
like, I don't do that in VC, I only do that in text. And your sentence was evidential virtues in inductive or abductive, like fucking whatever. You understand the issue with that? Like, you understand what I'm saying now, right? When I'm like, okay, you just throw a bunch of big words together. It doesn't mean it's incoherent. Sometimes it works. But people that are like layman don't understand it.
So firstly, listen, I have to go right now, right? Because I have to go right now, but I'm just going to wrap this up pretty simply. I think you just gaslight the situation. Evidential virtues is not a big term. It's very obvious you're unable to prove any of the claims you're making, and you're just gaslighting. Like, evidential virtues, like, seriously? Quince can understand this shit, and Quince doesn't study philosophy. Quince understands everything I say, and he doesn't study philosophy. You're just gaslighting, and you have no good evidence. That's why I have bad record, no rhetoric. You're just basically appealing to, like, the audience or something like that, which doesn't really work, by the way, because obviously everything I've said was pretty much understandable. For someone who debates philosophy, how do you struggle to understand something which is something like causal power? That doesn't make any sense to me.
Okay, just look in chat, okay?
That's just going to be me wrapping up this debate. Yeah.
Just look in chat real quick. When I look at evidential virtues, I have a Springer blog, and that's it. That's the only thing that comes up. Which means that you throw together words, which is fine. Sometimes I can understand them, but you can't be like, okay, this person knows what this means, you moron, when the words you're using just aren't recorded anywhere. It's not my fault, right? Because I haven't read anything about what it means for evidential virtues to exist, because they don't